And we have Martin ready. So I'm going to bow out now and hand him the microphone. I do want to give him a little bit of an introduction, though. Bear with me a moment while I change screens. Martin's going to be talking to us about asymmetrical data warfare, which should be interesting. Martin's been doing this for a while, and somehow, for some reason, Martin, asymmetrical and you, they do mesh real well in my mind.
Oh dear me. So I can't tell. Am I live right now? Can you see me? Can you hear me?
I see it here. Yeah, I don't know. Are we live yet, Steve?
There we go. It looks like I am live now. Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, I've been doing this a while. God, dear me. Yeah, I started doing SEO back before it had a name in the Alta Vista days. I think I was originally optimizing pages for Lycos and Infoseek and Alta Vista, and that would have been the kind of late 90s, 96, 97. So aging myself terribly here. I've been doing this for 22, 23, 24 years. And it's got to the stage where basically this is all I can do. I'm essentially useless for any other task in life. But luckily, SEO kind of exploded and went from being something that was fundamentally kind of like an academic hobby in the late 90s to something that I was eking a living out of in the very early 2000s to an entire career that I've managed to have now over the last 2 and a bit decades. So I'm very grateful to the fact that the internet has caught on. My dad actually said to me in about 1998, he said, this whole internet thing isn't going to catch on. It's a flash in the pan, son. You should go and get yourself a proper job. And I am immensely grateful every day that I didn't follow that advice. If you guys cannot see my presentation right now, please let me know, because I only have my laptop because I'm also traveling. So normally, if I'm sat in my office, I have like a really good DSLR camera set up, and I've got a proper microphone, and I've got studio lighting and things like that. Right now, I'm sat in essentially a large cupboard in a family home in the south of England, waiting to go down to Brighton SEO as well, where I will be seeing Dixon tomorrow, just to finalize where Dixon is at this point in time and where I'm going to be tomorrow. Anyway, I am assuming that you guys can all hear me. Please feel free to shout if not, or send me a message by any other means. And yeah, Doc, to your point a minute ago, the name of my talk is Asymmetrical Data Warfare and SEO. And a subtitle for this talk is going to be Do-It-Yourself Domination of Your Own Niche. So this comes about basically because I was either kind of like an affiliate for the first part of my career, and then I built up a network of content sites. But in about 2007, I went in-house, and I started working for some large corporate enterprises. I kind of worked my way kind of up the food chain in these enterprises till I took a job in 2011, so 10 years ago now, as Director of Inbound Marketing for Expedia EAN, and gradually over the following 6 to 7 years got promoted within Expedia until I was head of SEO for the regional brand groups of Expedia, which is every one of the consumer front ends apart from Expedia.com. Now, when you're working in that kind of environment, and particularly 10 years ago, there weren't really any SEO tools that were kind of tailored to what it is that you do and what it is that you need to do to be able to execute SEO at that scale. But it was okay because, you know, with the resources that a company of the scale of Expedia has available to it, you can build your own tools. You can make your own in-house tools that are crawlers, or 404 detectors, or even internal link analyzers. And roll them out, because you've got that massive amount of resource behind you, but also an incredibly bought-in C-suite because of the amount of revenue that the organic search is producing. I left Expedia in conscious that I'm probably moving into my introduction slide, but I left Expedia in 2017 and started working initially just as a solo consultant, working for other large companies in the San Francisco Bay Area, and discovered fairly quickly that the tool suite that I had been used to using in my previous life in-house simply didn't exist in a commercial basis. I mean, there's plenty of really good SEO tool companies out there, but there was nothing that really filled the criteria that I needed, which was being able to crawl very large websites and analyze all sorts of unique data points, but do so in a flexible way, depending on what the specific thing was that I was trying to analyze at that point in time. So about 3 or 4 months into my career as a solo consultant, in about October or November 2017, I said to myself, hey, I used to be a programmer. How hard can it be? I reckon I can build my own crawler tool in maybe 6 weeks. And here we are, 3.5 years later, and it is still dominating the majority of my time. So I code every single day to continue building on the application that I've spent the last 3.5 years building. And what I wanted to talk to you today about was, as we have on the screen here, asymmetrical data warfare in SEO. But on top of that, the kind of learnings that I've had from building my own tool set over the last 3.5 years, so that you can take some of those learnings and incorporate it into your own workflow and your own processes, so that you can do two things. You can, one, get a much better view of kind of very specific items that you may want to focus on in your daily role as an SEO, as opposed to what it is that the tool companies put upon you. And it also allows you to scale in a much more cost-effective way. Now, just to cover the name of the talk, so asymmetrical, as in parts that are not equal or equivalent. So the point here is, if you have your own data store, you can expand that to include any data points that you like. The tool that I've been building over the last couple of years stores about 900 data points on a per URL basis, has 400 SEO rules. I store all sorts of data from all sorts of APIs. And it's asymmetrical because I absolutely know through 20 plus years of experience that the reality is 99.99% of SEOs don't have the ability to be able to analyze data at that level and take decisions based upon data of that depth and breadth. So if you follow this kind of recipe that I'm going to put forward over the next 40 minutes or so, then you too will have the same kind of advantages of having a much greater data set to be able to work on. And the last word in the title there, warfare, is the way that I've always looked at this is SEO, excluding when Google reduced the number of blue links on the first page. SEO is essentially a zero-sum game. If you're number one, then someone else has been pushed down to number two, and vice versa. You are competing against these other websites, as obvious as that should be to anyone. This is something where, if you have the right data to make the right decisions and follow the correct path, you can beat other people. So what we end up with here is a format for asymmetrical data warfare. I promise this deck is very light on these kind of glib philosophy statements, but essentially, this is something that I've always believed in since working in large enterprise, is that you have to use a data-first approach. You have to measure every single input that you're aware of and every output, so that you can understand and then drive the changes that you want to meet the targets that you're trying to reach. So a little bit about us very quickly. As I said a minute ago, I left Expedia and founded my company Mog Media in July of 2017. So I've been doing this for a little bit over 4 years now, about 4 years and 3 months at this point in time. For the first 3 years, it was me sat by myself in my office in Los Gatos, which is in the South Bay. It's close to San Jose, 15-20 minutes away from Google, if people know the Bay Area. And over the last 12 months, we've actually started scaling up quite fast. We now have 11 staff in 4 different locations, a large remote team in the UK. And one of the reasons that I've been able to scale my operations over the last 12 months is because I put in 2.5 years at that point in time of work into building my own solution so that we can scale the kind of work that we're doing for people. And kind of another point of note is that ever since I started Mog Media, the only kind of client that I've tried to work with has been large enterprise style clients that have got either very specific complex problems or websites with tens or hundreds of millions of pages where kind of a traditional approach to SEO is very, very difficult. So that's enough about me. That's enough about my history. The rest of this talk is actually a sequel. And it's a sequel to a talk that I gave at MozCon in 2012. So this presentation is on YouTube. You can Google what if MacGyver did SEO Martin MacDonald in YouTube, and you'll get this presentation. And it's 30 minutes long of what you would need to do to build a platform where you can replicate the functionality of something like SEMrush or Ahrefs or Bright Edge, but specific for your industry and your websites. So I gave this talk, 10 years ago now almost. And basically I laid down a framework for the kind of perfect SEO tool suite that I would like to see. And I really hoped that there would have been someone there in the audience that day that would have thought, yeah, we really need to do this, and they would have gone and built it. Unfortunately, I was not very inspiring that day because nobody went and built it. So consequently, I have now built it myself. But if you want to get the background on my thinking that led to the last kind of 3.5 years of pain of sat up late at night building tools, you can go back and watch that presentation because it will give you kind of some background into where I'm coming from with all of this. And the other precursor that I'd just like to kind of get through is the way that I think about SEO overall, because it's kind of critical to the way that the tool works, the way that I think about it, and the way that results are produced in basically any environment for any client, and how you can tailor the same thinking to your website as well. So the absolute basis of any website ranking is a solid foundation in technical SEO. Basically, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, SEO was kind of much more reactionary and kind of manipulative than it is now. I stopped being kind of reactionary and manipulative, reactionary towards Google updates, and manipulative when you look at, for instance, content production or backlink creation or any of those things. I kind of stopped with that way of thinking years ago now. It was probably about the same time as I started at Expedia. Simply because when you're working on enterprise sites particularly, but to a wider extent any website, if you haven't got a solid foundation of technical SEO and Google finds it inefficient to crawl and to parse the contents in your website, then frankly, those pages aren't going to be indexed. They're not going to be returned in search. And you failed at the first hurdle. So you can have the best content in the world. You could have all of the backlinks in the world. But frankly, if your website isn't easily crawled, parsed, and understood by Google, you ain't going to rank. So I always think of kind of technical SEO as far as the site build and the architecture is concerned as being the bedrock of any ranking campaign. The next important part of this whole puzzle is a full understanding as to what it is that your potential market are searching for. Whether that is when they're leading towards a transaction, or they're in the research phase, or even if it's just a kind of audience that might be tangentially interested in the offering that you have on your website, you really need to have a full understanding of every possible thing that they're going to be searching for in that kind of like 360-degree view of how they may interact with your brand. So the technical SEO is first. A full understanding as to what your universe is and what you want to rank for is second. And then once you've got those two things sorted out, the next important thing is being able to optimize the content that you're producing to match the demand that you've identified, and also be able to kind of iteratively change your strategy if you see data that points you in that direction. So any website in the world, that is the way that I think about overall SEO for them. But another way of thinking about that is quite simply, we need data, data, data. And I will point out that those three versions of the word data are not to scale based on the amount of data that you need. You need a tremendous amount of data to have a complete 360-degree view of each and every one of those tranches that we want to get optimized. Now, what I've done over the next 3 slides is I've kind of mapped out these 3. I'll go back. These 3 kind of tiers of things that need to happen, and we're going to start at the bottom. We're going to work our way up. So, you don't need me to tell you these things, because these are the kind of things that you as an SEO are already looking at. You might not be looking at all of them. Many of you will be, but many of you won't be. Many of you might be looking at 2 or 3 of these, or a handful, or maybe even half of the things on this screen. But to go back to the overall top title, if you want to win in an asymmetrical game of data warfare, you need to be looking at more data and in more depth than your competitors to take better decisions to rank better. So this first screen here is simply some of the stuff that we would look at from a technical SEO perspective. You'll all be familiar with it. If you use any competent modern crawler, it will be looking at much of this for you. You've got your internal crawl data items on the left and the third-party data on the right. Both of them are kind of equally as important to each other, but we'll cover the interplay between the 2 sets in a little bit more detail in a moment. You also then have, so many options for the keyword and the market research. So I put down what really is a very limited selection of the kinds of things that we as SEOs look at here. But there's so much more. There's clickstream tracking from companies like SimilarWeb, for instance. There's traditional market research that's available from market research agencies. There's so much more information out there than I've got noted on this slide. But it's just to give you an idea as to the kind of things that, if you want to win this war, that you need to be tracking and understanding on a regular and a frequent basis. And the last of those 3 tiers of SEO was the content optimization data, which, while the kind of bedrock of technical SEO, in my mind, is the most important, it's the most important to get right. But then the continual iterative optimization data is the most important thing for your process moving forward, kind of over the next 6 months to 2 years to 3 years. If you can track and record the inputs that you're putting into your websites and then put them against these kind of items to further tailor what it is that you're doing and refine your overall strategies, then you are ultimately going to win this war. Now, just between the bullet points that I've put down here, which is in no means an exhaustive list of all of the things that you should be tracking, that was roughly 50 different bullet points over the last 3 slides. So, there's a lot of stuff there, and it's kind of more than, I can't talk for everyone, but it's more than my brain can handle on a daily basis, is recalling all of those things for those 50 different bullet points, and bearing in mind that you could probably expand that list out 1 or 2 times further. So this is where you end up in the situation where you really need to have a competent SEO tool platform. And there's loads of them out there. Some are better than others. Broadly speaking, I think they're all very good individually. They've all got their own strengths individually. I guarantee you that your competitors will be using one of those platforms, maybe more than one of those platforms. But very, very, very few of them will have built their own internal data store, which is kind of what I'm suggesting that you do today. So, I promise to refund you 100% of the money that you're paying me to present this if your competitors are doing this well. Because, I've just, in 20 years of experience of working on these sites, I've never really seen too many instances where an overall site is doing all of these things well. So this all sounds, kind of fairly straightforward and like, hell, yeah, I should be doing this. I should be building a data store and so on and so forth. Well, you remember 5 minutes ago, I said to you, I thought 3.5 years ago, hey, how hard can it be? This must only take, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks to do. And here we are. So what I'd like to do is spend some time now kind of going over the top 10 lessons, that I've learned over the last couple of years in building this tool out, and hopefully that will inspire some of you to either go whole hog and do the same kind of thing as I've done, or alternatively, just to focus on a tight set of those bullet points that I was presenting a minute ago that make the most sense for your business. In a nutshell, what it is that I've spent the last 3.5 years building is a function to crawl every page on a client's site, extracting nearly 900 data points from every single one of those URLs, and then a configurable rules engine that allows you to create your own rules on a per website basis to find SEO faults. Back-end data that allows you to prioritize those improvements and prioritize them intelligently against the opportunity that is out there based on the pages that would be affected, the thing about those pages that would be affected, and the current traffic and ranking of those individual pages in an aggregate group. So there's that's what I've been building, and I'm going to now go through the stuff that I've learned quite simply because this has been a real slog for me. And when I started this, I looked like the guy on the left. That obviously is me. I now obviously look like the guy on the right. So consequently, I've taken one for the team here. And hopefully some of the things that I've learned over the last couple of years will help some of you guys out there in building your own tool sets. So the first thing that I'll say is, okay, where do I start? What's, what are the constituent elements that I need to be able to replicate this approach? And the good news is you don't need to go out there and you don't need to write your own crawler. You don't need to completely build your own platforms from scratch. You don't need to be like a C# ninja or a Python wizard or any of these things. You simply need to have some understanding as to how databases work, an understanding as to where you can acquire the data that you want to be able to implement into the solution that you're going to put together with your own data, and you need a crawler. So I've mentioned Sitebulb specifically here. I'll get into the why in a second, but basically, what having this kind of tool available to you allows you to do is to build kind of a full 360-degree process where you're building your own data set. You're then understanding everything that's wrong with your website and all of the things that need to be done to improve it. And you're also then critically measuring the output on a day-by-day or a week-by-week or a month-by-month basis to understand what it was that you did, what effect that it had, what the financial output of that was, so that you can get further buy-in from C-suite, from your boss, further revenue from the website yourself, if it's your own site, so that you can reinvest it and continue to kind of do more and more and more and eventually snowball the SEO traffic that you've got. So next part of this talk is 10, and I said they're kinda because some of them are split up into 2 or 3 different items. 10 lessons learned after 3 years building an in-house SEO solution. Now, I said a second ago that I was going to go into my reasons for putting Sitebulb on that first slide earlier, because hey, I love Screaming Frog, you love Screaming Frog, everyone loves Screaming Frog. Every SEO should have a Screaming Frog license. Like that just kind of goes without a doubt. I called it a couple of years ago on Twitter, the annual tax for being an SEO is having a Screaming Frog license. And I stand by that. It is absolutely magnificent. It's a phenomenal crawler, but it doesn't really work in the environment that I'm talking about here of having your own database. However, Sitebulb does. It genuinely does, because it was constructed in a different way. So you'll know that you don't need me to tell you that you configure a crawl in Screaming Frog, you set it going, and then you've got a ton of data that you can either analyze in the application itself and do stuff, or you can drop into Excel and get further learnings from, and again, do stuff. Sitebulb, if you haven't used it before, has got a crawler which is every bit as sophisticated as that produced by Screaming Frog. But the critical difference is it doesn't just drop all of the contents into what is fundamentally a large spreadsheet. It uses a rules engine as well to determine what improvements can be made on individual pages, and then categorize the way that things should be done with their own prioritization metrics. They put things up in a critically important, very important, medium, kind of that kind of prioritization. And my first recommendation to you all is, if you haven't used Sitebulb, go ahead and use it. It is great. Now, once you've got your crawler, you can then export the data and you can import it into something where you can splice and dice with API content from all of the different providers that I had on that slide earlier, and then start getting a much deeper understanding as to kind of the second order data points. Right now, this is an important concept, because when we are doing SEO in the regular sense, and we're using Search Console, or we're using SEMrush or Ahrefs or any of the other crawlers or platforms, we have a great layer of first order data points. You know, how many impressions a page had, how many clicks it had, what the CTR of that page was. But what we don't have too much of in many of these instances is the second order data points that are created by combining more than one other input. So in this screenshot here, which I've kind of masked the URLs out on the left, you'll notice that there's some columns in here that you might not be familiar in seeing. So you've got, kind of from left to right, quite simply, the depth, that's the click depth from home. The rank, that's kind of my proxy for internal page rank, or the links that an individual page has pointing at its URL from within your site. And this screenshot here is actually sorted. It's a client's website, and it's sorted by total number of impressions descending, as you can see. The top one's 1.3 million, and it drops off fairly quickly. What I'd like to draw your attention to is the the fifth line down, for instance, is a page which has got a really high click-through rate of 5.4%, which you can get from Search Console. It's got a high number of impressions, and it's got a high number of clicks, but it's got a really low number of internal links. It also has, looking at the last column there, a very high number of ranking keywords that URL has ranked for over the last 30 days. So on this screen, the clicks, CTR, and impressions are all things that are very easy for you to get. The internal links that are on pointing at those pages, and the total number of keywords that page ranks for, they're not things that are as easy to get, and certainly they're not things that are easy to represent quickly and efficiently without doing some VLOOKUPs in Excel and dropping stuff together, and that kind of just slows down your whole process. You don't want to be doing all of that. So kind of 2A, the first part of the second point, is this isn't about storing the data that Search Console has, or that Sitebulb or Screaming Frog has. It is about looking at multiples of these things together, and then using different metrics alongside each other, and sometimes building a third derivative metric. I'll cover some of those later, to allow you to really analyze all of the pages on your site in a much more efficient way than you would be able to without your own database. Another example of exactly this is looking at keywords rather than individual pages. So there's a column that's cut off on the left here, which is the keyword that site is ranking for. And you can see in here in this screen that I've got, alongside the Search Console data of impressions, CTR, clicks, and average position, I've also got the AdWords volume, and then a value of traffic. And quite simply, that value is the CPC value of that keyword multiplied by the number of clicks that the site has received in the last 30 days, to give you what the total value of that keyword is to you over the last 30 days. This is a fantastic way of getting buy-in from C-suite to get more budget to do more SEO. Because if you can say, just like in the amount of time it takes to click your fingers on a daily, monthly, weekly basis, exactly what the value is of traffic that you are generating, then it will make every conversation about resourcing far, far easier. Let me draw your eyes to the last two lines here, because cannibalization is a percentage and total number of URLs. These are a couple of examples of the kind of more derivative metrics that I've produced by combining one or more other inputs. Now, as SEOs, we're all familiar with what I would politely refer to with lots of love as bullshit metrics. Things like, I don't know, domain authority or page authority or any of these things that SEO tool companies like making up. And we're all very critical of them because fundamentally Google don't use them and people misunderstand what they're for and so on and so forth. I also am kind of not immune to this, and I've made up my own bullshit metric, which is the cannibalization score, which is the second from the end. And just to explain what that is, because this is the kind of thing that you can really turn into actionable data straight away, is the cannibalization score there. Let me just move on to my next slide. I'm going to flip back and forth a few times. You can see that the top line of the cannibalization score has 4.5% cannibalization. The second line has 43% cannibalization. Now, what does that mean? It means that in the first example, 94.6% of all clicks for that keyword went to one page. However, in the second example, 57% of clicks, or 56.9% of clicks, went to the top ranked page, and the other 57% of clicks actually went to the other 49 URLs here. So that's an example of a keyword with a large amount of cannibalization. And this is something that you can work out from Search Console if you've got Excel and unlimited time. However, if you can put together an API connection to Search Console, and we'll cover exactly what this calculation looks like way down deeper in the deck, you can simply extract all of the pages that have had impressions for an individual keyword, sum up the total number of clicks that each one of them have had, and then look at all of the pages, all of the keywords on your site, and sort them by the cannibalization. Now, what I've found on a practical basis is, if you have keywords like that second example that I gave that have got 40, 50, 60, 70%, 80% cannibalization, it's one of two instances. It's either a geographical page. Let me give you an example of that. Say you are, I don't know, you're doing SEO for a lawyer's website, and you type in DUI lawyer, great keyword, $300 CPC, whatever it is. Depending on where you are, you're going to see local results. If the website that you've got has got 10,000 local pages, then frankly, you would expect to see a large amount of cannibalization for that individual query. In that circumstance, you wouldn't do anything. But the contrary is also true. Say, for instance, you've got a website where you've got kind of like a huge bank of old blog posts. You might have 500 or 1,000 old blog posts. And you see that some of your critical keywords are cannibalized between many of those. Sympathetically linking from the ones that you don't want to rank to the one that you actually want to rank, we'll cover that in a minute as well, it gives you the ability to be able to promote the ranking on the correct page at the expense of the ones that you don't want to rank. So these kind of derivative metrics can actually be really powerful, but it just depends on what it is that you want to do and how you want to build your system. The third thing that I've found out in architecting these systems is that ranking data is actually far, far more than just ranking data. Now, if we were in a big room right now and I could see everyone, I'd ask you to put your hands up and say how many people are using SERP tracking or ranking data for 5 or more items. And I assume that most of you wouldn't put your hands up. Well, over the last 3 years, I've used ranking data for probably 20 different applications at this point in time now. So, and the supplier that I use for this is a company called Bright Data. It used to be called Luminati.io. It's quite simply just an API that gives you Google tracking in a local basis in the US. But the JSON that they return back to also includes all of the people also asked queries against a keyword, all of the related keywords, all of the PPC ads, which we then count and analyze. And all of these things are super, super valuable to help you craft your keyword research. The example that I've got up on the screen right now is just very simply, the left-hand column is the keywords that this site already ranks for, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth column along with the questions is what the people also asked questions are against that keyword. So let me give you an example. Say you rank 12th, 15th, something like that for a really big keyword in your industry. You can't break into the first page because there's so much competition. Well, if you have got the correct kind of FAQ page for each one of the people also asked questions against that individual keyword, you might never break into the top 10, but you can own the PAA box, which typically exists either in second or in fourth position underneath first or third, and actually has a really high CTR as well. So there's an example of something else that you can use ranking data for. Another kind of secondary metric that I academically find this really interesting is CTR curves. So it's something that as an industry we're doing less of these days, but I mean, you'll remember if you've been doing this for a while, there's loads of examples where, you know, a company that does rank tracking typically will release their kind of industry guide as to what CTR curves are doing in 2017 or 2018. Well, the reality is, when you actually look at a large data set, is that your CTR curves are living, breathing things, and you need to be fully aware of what the differences are between different sets of keywords, different intent in keywords, to understand what the actual CTR curve is. One of the derivative metrics that we've put together, which you could do as well if you've got PPC data, is looking at what the CTR is for all keywords on a site against the tier of CPC cost. So this is something that I've never seen in public before, and this is the first time I've talked about it in public. This site here is a real world live site. I'm tracking 140,000 keywords on a monthly basis. And if you just look at all 140,000 keywords, P1 currently has, this is the last 30 days of data from like last week when I put this deck together. P1 has 21% CTR, P2 has 10% CTR. That's all 140,000 keywords. If I look now at just keywords with a CPC of greater than $10, the CTR has dropped. It's 17% in P1 and 7.5% in P2. And then we look at, well, hey, what about a CPC cost of over $30? And it carries on dropping. Now, obviously, because companies are not paying for, you know, typically tens of thousands of keywords that have got a CPC of above 50 or above 100, you know, unless you're in a really specific kind of niche industry. It's the data kind of then gets a little bit messy as you get higher up in this. But I've previously calculated this in kind of $1 increments. CPC cost 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and then mapped that out. And what I found is that the higher the CPC has a direct correlation with the lower the CTR that you get in organic. So, number of reasons why this could be. There's more PPC ads. Google are doing a better job of funneling clicks into paid search than they are into SEO. You know, there's all sorts of reasons why this might be. But the reality is, without that kind of visibility, you might come up with an SEO strategy, because I certainly have in the past, saying, hey, listen, you guys are already paying for these 500 keywords where you're paying more than $40 CPC for every single one of them. Let's focus relentlessly on those, because that'll bring you the best ROI. The reality is that those keywords have actually got a lower CTR as a group to organic search than keywords that have got a much lower CPC. Now that I understand this, I use this as part of my overall keyword research. But without building this kind of data set, I never would have had this visibility. So this is one of those things that, you know, if you can put together one of these databases, we'll cover the DIY bit later on in whatever 5-10 minutes in the deck. This is one of the first things that I would suggest that you look at, because this was kind of transformational to my overall planning. So other stuff, point 6 of the 10 things that I've learned in building these tools is once you start splicing your crawl data, so looking for kind of SEO issues, and you can see here, this one specifically is something that's in both Sitebulb and in Screaming Frog, and it's in the tool that I've built as well. So URLs that have only one followed internal linking URL, i.e. pages that don't have very much page rank. If you can extract all of the pages that break any of these rules, and then you can look at the total number of clicks or impressions and ranking and number of ranking keywords that every one of those URLs has, it will give you a much better guide as to what it is that you actually need to fix on your website, rather than just saying, oh, hey, there's this rule, it's been broken, you need to optimize this. Because then what happens is, if it's a client you're giving this to and they go away and they optimize 75% of these pages that don't have any impressions or clicks in the first place, they've wasted a load of time. You look stupid. If you're in-house and you do this, you don't want to be wasting your time. You want to be focusing on the stuff that's actually going to move the needle. So splicing performance data in a live environment versus individual rules that are broken help you understand which pages you need to be optimizing against any individual rule. But critically, it also helps you understand kind of in aggregate what major issues you want to be tackling over the next month, over the next quarter, over the next year. So I've unfortunately truncated the kind of header row of this, but basically those 3 columns on the right are quite simply number of clicks, number of impressions, number of URLs affected. So based on this, I know absolutely that there is no point in me fixing like the 5th one from the bottom, the HTML content not minified, because it's one URL with no impressions. I know that the title tag items on this page, on this individual site, are probably places that I want to be investing some time and effort to get fixed. Another thing that I found over the last couple of years of building this is it kind of goes against a lot of the learnings that we have in overall SEO, is Google appears to be very forgiving with total percentage of duplicate content as appears on page beyond a certain or underneath a certain level, if you like. Because the first 3 columns that I've got here, this is all data that is available in Screaming Frog or in Sitebulb, but then comparing it to Search Console data on the right of the screen allows you to see that there is very little correlation between the percentage of duplicate content on an individual page, as long as it's less than a certain amount, and the total number of clicks it's got, impressions it's got, ranking keywords it's got. Now, I say until you hit about a specific amount. When you've got pages that are greater than roughly 75 to 80% duplicate content, and my definition of duplicate content here is that the individual sentences are only displayed on that URL within this site. I'm not referring to cross-site or kind of internet-wide duplicate content. I'm purely referring to on-site duplicate content. But until you hit about 75 or 80% of non-unique content on an individual page, I see very little correlation between a page being more unique or having more words and ranking for more keywords or ranking better. So, that also kind of puts paid to the whole concept of, well, hey, 200 words isn't good enough. We need to have 5,000 words, because the reality is, I see outliers that have got a couple of 100 words on a page and they rank for 10,000 keywords. So, it really kind of hammers home the point that the content that you're producing and that you're publishing needs to fit its purpose rather than be built to any kind of SEO-led specification. And Google doesn't really get pissed off until it's crawling pages that are basically almost the same as another page that's already crawled on your website. Another thing, now Dixon was on immediately before me. I don't know if I still am. I was the first API partner for Inlinks about October, November last year, something like that. They actually built their API for me against the specifications that I requested. And I won't go into too much detail on this because Dixon, no doubt, did a much better job than I ever could about talking through this stuff. I listened to his conversation, and he was giving an example about hops and the different entities that you've got to have on a page to be a to kind of be an expert on hops as far as Google is concerned. I can back that up as well, because I've seen in quite a few occasions, but like one specific example was a jewelry retailer client of ours in the United States wanted to rank for different kinds of diamond cuts. Now, what we were able to look at against all of the ranking keywords for the top 10, top 20 results for these individual keywords was that 8 of the top 10 had a specific set of entities that our site did not have. and it was actually to do with the history of the individual cut and who'd produced it, and what that person's name was, and bio, and all the rest of it. And we noticed this, that our site didn't have it. 8 out of the top 10 did. We rewrote the content to include it and climbed from the bottom of the first page to the middle of the first page. Now, it didn't give us a #1 ranking, but that was the only thing that we changed on the page at that point in time. And going back to the CTR graphs, if you go from a 1% CTR to an 8% CTR, you may have only gone from, say, 8th or 9th to 4th or 5th or 6th, but you've just multiplied by 8x the amount of traffic that you're getting from that keyword on that page. If you scale that up to the entire website, particularly in an enterprise environment, you can massively increase the total amount of traffic that you're getting. So use Dixon's Inlinks. I'm advertising his service here. And another thing that this is one of my real academic kind of loves. I really geek out on internal linking, and kind of always have done. One of the things that I do is I try and build a mathematical representation of the perfect internal link, and then I use that mathematical definition to define what the source URL, what the anchor text, and what the destination URL should be for automated linking and in-content linking on a per client basis. Now, I have done it by looking at various pieces of data that are, again, kind of either primary available from any of these APIs or from Search Console, or are secondary metrics that I have created by calculating more than one of the others. So, first of all, is the page that you want to rank the target for that page? Is it the correct one? So look at the cannibalization score. If the page has got a low cannibalization score, you can assume that Google has decided that is the correct page for that keyword. Does Google already rank other pages for that same keyword? If so, then Google has already decided that more than one page on your site is relevant for that term. So therefore, they are related, and you can link from A to B. Going back to the Inlinks API, is there a high correlation between all of the entities that exist on that page? If there is, then that's another great example of a set of pages that can be used as the source and the destination. And then all we need to do is look at which keywords have got the greatest opportunity, which we determine by looking again at those CTR curves and saying, well, how much extra traffic will we get by gaining a position or 2 positions or 3 positions for this keyword? And we model that out and then throw X amount of links from the source pages that we defined in the first part of this exercise to the correct page for that keyword, and then look and see what happens over the next 30, 60, 90 days. And then basically take kind of like a decision from there moving forwards as to whether or not we're going to refine it, if we're going to change some of those links, if we're going to add more, based on what the outcome has been. I said a second ago, 30, 60, 90, because a word of warning on this, I have found almost universally that when creating these programmatic link modules, you almost always see an initial dip in overall ranking for the keywords that you're targeting. And that dip can last, it can last a couple of days, but more typically it lasts a couple of weeks, and then it starts climbing up afterwards. It's super annoying. I don't know if any of you guys have seen the same. I see it all the time. And it's always kind of really worrying that you've just implemented something and all of a sudden, kind of like the client saying, well, hey, shit, we've built this this custom link module that you've asked us for, and our rankings have all gone down by 3. But hang in there to the kind of 30, 45, 60, 90-day time frame. And you're almost universally at that point in a better situation. So that was just 10. There's probably 500 things that I've learned about SEO just in the last 3 years of building these solutions for large companies. And I say that, with a 15 or 17 year history prior to that of working in SEO. But it's only when you really kind of roll your sleeves up and get really involved in this data that you start seeing this much wider picture and understanding what the impact is of the actions that you're taking. So hopefully I've inspired you that you probably want to be doing this for your site and you want to get started. And, in a perfect world, we're all programming ninjas. It's not a perfect world though, is it? I personally, I can program a bit in PHP. I can do no Python whatsoever, like absolutely none. And I know that that is kind of like the SEO's favorite language of choice for the last couple of years. I have never programmed anything in Python, and everything that I do has got nothing to do with Python. So if you too don't know it, don't worry, because you don't need to know it. I do know quite a bit of MySQL. You should probably brush up on how databases work, and maybe even just do like a quick online course on databases and their construction and what tables are and what relationships are, if it's something that you're not familiar with and that you haven't used before. But anyway, your data starter kit essentially can be done very, very cheaply. Sitebulb is, I don't know, £30, $50 a month, something like that. I don't know. It's put it this way, it's more expensive than Screaming Frog, but it's an order of magnitude better, particularly in this environment. So I would suggest that you use Sitebulb as a crawler. And then after that, I mean, you could do all of the things that I've talked about here simply in Excel and using VBA and something like Niels Bosma's SEO tools for Excel. But for bonus brownie points, you would be better off, if you're coming into this in an environment where you don't know how to program, is using something like Airtable or its great-great-great-grandfather FileMaker. Those are both, in inverted commas, low code, low LOW, low code platforms. I mean, the reality is you can write really complex applications in either Airtable or FileMaker that can do all of the things that I've been talking about so far. So you don't need to be kind of a programming expert. You do need to have an understanding as to how databases work. But you know, this is something that literally anybody can pick up over a couple of months. Doesn't need to be hard. One quick note on doing this natively in Excel, because if you go back to the presentation that I gave at MozCon 10 years ago, I'd actually prototyped all of this for that presentation in Excel using Visual Basic. That approach can work. It's got scalability issues, but if you've only got a small site, it's a fine place to start. The problem is it only works in the PC version, so I'm very sorry, Mac users. I've been a Mac user for a decade myself, until the last year or so. And frankly, this is one of the reasons that I had to move back to a PC, is that the VBA handling in Excel is so much better on the Microsoft Windows version of the program. So you've got your kind of kit of things that you need to be able to start building this kind of reporting. The other thing that you crucially need to understand is what the data structure is. Now, if you've never built a database before and you've never programmed, that might sound really daunting, but it's actually really simple. The reality is there's only three things going on here. You've got your crawl data, you've got your third-party API data, and you've got your keyword data. The keyword data principally comes from Search Console, but you get search query volume data from people like Keywords Everywhere or Data for SEO, both of whom are really good. Recommend both of them. And every single thing that you save in this database should be tagged to one of those three items, whether it's a URL that's come from your crawler, whether it's a URL that's come from third-party data, which then should then get attached to your crawler URL, or whether it's keyword data, which fundamentally is also tied to a URL that you can then tie back to your URL. Once you've kind of got that structure put together, then it's actually really simple and everything is related. Now, I know that looks really, really complicated, and that literally is a screenshot of the relationship diagram for the tool that I've been building over the last couple of years. And it looks ridiculous, but the reality is you start with 2 tables or 3 tables, and you just build from there. And gradually over time, you either get to the stage where you've got enough learnings from the tool and you don't need to develop it any further, or like me, you kind of really enjoy kind of geekily, academically building this stuff and kind of carry on. But the important thing to remember here is everything is either part of a URL's data set or part of a keywords data set, and it's how you put those 2 things together. Now, hoping again that I've incited you to start. Where do you get started on this? Super simple. I would start, if I was doing all this again, with a copy of Sitebulb. using the bulk export feature because that gets you most of the data and it gets it to you today rather than in 3 months time or 6 months time of building your own crawler. So for £30 a month, buy a copy of SiteBulb. Google Search Console's API is free. The one hint on the Search Console API, because so many people complain that it doesn't have all of the keyword data. Well, in my experience, it kind of does have like 99+% of all the keyword data and all the clicks that that your site is receiving, but it just depends how you query it. And the last hint I'm going to leave you with here is when you start doing this, download individual days of data from Search Console in their entirety first, and then put those together into a database afterwards so that you can do kind of like date range searches against your own database of Search Console data. I guarantee you 99% of the time that people are complaining about a lack of keywords, it's because they're applying filters in the API call. If you don't, or a wide date range in the API call. If you don't do either of those things, you get monumental amounts of data available to you. I'm conscious that I'm running short on time. I think this is my last slide, guys. But basically, the big question here is why would you bother going to this kind of, doing what I've done? Look at what it's done to me as far as aging me is concerned, for God's sake. Why would you inflict that upon yourself? Well, the reality is when you're DIYing this stuff, when you're doing it yourself, you're building a solution that is absolutely tailored to exactly what you want out of it. I think SEMrush, Ahrefs, and Bright Edge as well, they're fantastic platforms. They're really, really good. But say, for instance, you want to do one specific query on one piece of data that you think is critical to the reason that you're not winning in SEO. I mean, you're never going to get SEMrush or Ahrefs to build that as a custom report for you. But if you've gone through the effort for only a month or two of building your own database and experimenting with this stuff and importing into tables and understanding how to query it, it becomes second nature and you can just go ahead and do all of this stuff yourself. I promised there wouldn't be many of these philosophy slides, but we believe absolutely that that a data-driven strategy is absolutely vital to marketing success, and that's the reason that I've put in tens of thousands of hours, it feels like, over the last 3.5 years building this thing. And I hope if you take one thing away from this talk today is is that it's easy to do. It doesn't need to be incredibly bafflingly difficult. And anyone can do it because, frankly, I mean, hey, I did. So I'd really love to see more people out there, whether you're in-house, whether you're agency side, building more of these tools and talking about it in public and sharing the kind of insights that I've gone through it today and these 10 things that I've learned, because, a rising tide lifts all boats, and I think we would all benefit from it greatly. I think I'm pretty much out of time. Doc, Steve, I don't know if we have any questions or anything to go through. Let me bring you guys back up on the screen.
We didn't get any questions in, but I think that's probably due to the fact that you covered everything in such great detail.
Excellent.
I feel both challenged and prideful about the fact that you and I agree on a lot of things. For instance, I was a Screaming Frog fanatic for several years. And then when SiteBulb came out and I gave it a shakeout, I fell in love.
Yeah.
They're both great tools. They're both essential, and they're both in my toolbox. But I love the intuitive nature of SiteBulb because you can drill down and filter stuff beautifully.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? So the only shortcoming with SiteBulb really is that it doesn't have that kind of live Google Search Console connection, in as much that you can set up like to download the last 30 days worth of data, but it doesn't do a great job of then comparing what the performance was on a per page level against the individual items that it's flagging. And that was one of my main use cases when I started. But yeah, to your point, I mean, there's a place for both of them, and I don't think SiteBulb replaces Screaming Frog.
Not quite,
but but if I could have only one, it would be without question SiteBulb.
Yeah.
And it's and they're a good team over there as well. So they're very responsive to adding new stuff in when you ask them, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, they did a really fine job on that. And as you said there towards the end, database decisions are the only decisions we should be making.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so much of what we used to do in SEO 15 years ago was based on intuition. And frankly, you may as well be flipping a coin at that point in time. The point in this concept of kind of asymmetrical data warfare is that if you track all of these hundreds and hundreds of things, and you track it for your own site and for your competitors' sites, you've got a kind of like a deep layer of visibility here that your competitors are not doing. They're not leveraging this data in the same way, because I've only maybe I've worked with hundreds of companies over the last 20 years, right? I have only ever seen maybe the amount of companies I could count on one hand that have taken it to kind of this extreme. And you don't need to take it to this extreme either. You could just build something that only focuses on the items that you're most interested in yourself. But the reality is, if you build that yourself, you've then got the ability to tailor it any which way you want. And you never know, it might give you insights that would never otherwise be available, such as the kind of keyword cannibalization stuff, or the internal linking stuff, or the blah, blah, blah. So I would love, even if one person watching today goes out and builds something, that will make all of this worthwhile.
Well, it was a brilliant presentation, Martin, and I applaud the fact that you have introduced a new bullshit metric. It certainly stands head and shoulders above things like DA.
Well, this is how I introduce it to clients as well. I'm like, hey, listen, so how I'm always critical about this metric and that metric because they don't really mean anything. I'm like, well, here's a metric that also doesn't mean anything because I made it up. But if you then follow it up with what the kind of the maths is behind it, and they understand, because like the cannibalization one, if 5% of the if 95% of the clicks on that keyword go to one URL, then it has 5% cannibalization. If 25% of the clicks go to that one URL, then it has 75% cannibalization. That's a fairly simple concept to understand. And every client I've ever spoken to has just got it straight off. And then they're like, oh, right, yeah, so these other blog posts here, we should probably get rid of them, is what you're saying? Like, well, no, you can internally link, you can take that content, you can modify it, you can improve it. There's lots of things that you can do at that point. But that layer of visibility into the percentage of cannibalization on a per keyword basis, I've never seen it in any other tool. It may be in them, but I personally haven't seen it. So it was one of the reasons that I put it in there.
It's brilliant. I hope that one of these days I'll get a chance to sit down with you on the beach in Barbados and share a few pints and pick your brain a little bit. Really appreciate. We do understand, for all of our speakers, we do understand that putting together a presentation, a 40-minute presentation might be 12 hours of preparation. So we understand that. We appreciate it, and we appreciate you being willing to share some real wisdom with the audience. So thank you very much. We do have to give our people a break.
Yeah.
I'm sure some people like myself have been taking on coffee and would like to get rid of some of it.
Absolutely. Hey, it's been my pleasure, and it could only have been better if we were able to do it in person. But hey, let's fingers crossed for next year, right?
Next year, mate.
Yeah, absolutely.